Nico Hülkenberg made a sudden comeback at the 2020 British Grand Prix this year, after Sergio Perez got tested positive to the new coronavirus, also known as COVID-19. And also in Formula 2 and Formula 3 there have been many replacements in the last races, especially at Spa. Yuri Vips debuting in Formula 2 because of Sean Gelael suffering a back injury after an incident with a curb at Spain. Then also Sophia Flörsch, for example, was unable to race in Formula 3, which brought Andreas Estner to a Formula 3 debut. They were all replacements for drivers who weren't able to race, not because they were thrown out of the team or banned or I don't know what, but because of something happening from the outside, like for example racing at another race, suffering an injury, or getting tested positive to an illness. And of course, Checo wasn't the only F1 driver in Formula 1 history to miss a Grand Prix because of outside influences. And I'm totally not talking about driver switches or mechanical failures, but real replacements for races because something unexpected happened. So in this video we're going to focus on 5 drivers of the last 20 years who missed a Grand Prix they were used to race in. Let's go! Hey guys, and welcome to a new video on your most favorite YouTube channel. My name is Max, and you know the topic of the video, so let us head right into it. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you like what we are doing. That will help us a lot. So we are going on to driver number 1. Fernando Alonso cannot be described in a few words. He's a world champion, but also a team radar god after his second McLaren stint. He failed to score Ferrari a championship, but makes a legendary return to F1 with his third stint at Renault from 2021 onwards. But he is also known for his other passions in motorsports after participating in the Indy 500 or the Rally Dakar. Participating in the Indy 500 in 2017 also forced him to miss a race of the Formula 1 season. He wanted to win the Triple Crown with McLaren, what still is an aim of the Spaniard. That meant that he wasn't able to attend for the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix and replaced by his former teammate Jenson Button, who came back for this race after retiring after 2016. But sadly both races from Button and Alonso were very different. Alonso did an excellent job for McLaren at the Indy 500, but faced engine issues, while Jenson Button didn't pee in Fernando's seat as he wanted to do, but what he did was to give Sauber's Pascal Verlaine a scary launch into the barriers on lap 57 and let him hang there like a cow. Also before the race in general, he was unlucky with getting a huge 15th place grid penalty and being forced to start from the pits. That didn't allow him to start in the qualified P9, what was a superb result for being in a McLaren and to just race for a single race after actually having retired. But the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix wasn't the only Grand Prix Alonso missed. I think we all remember his big crash with Haas's Esteban Gutierrez on lap 16 at the 2016 season opener in Melbourne, where the two-time world champion rolled over twice and suffered a massive 46G impact. At first Alonso was feeling fine and quickly fled the car to make sure his mother wasn't too worried about him and to show that he was okay. What Alonso probably didn't know after his impact, his crash not only resulted in a busy pit lane and a red flag, but also to a broken rib and a pneumothorax, which is easy to explain. It is a collapsed lung wing and very rarely can be fatal. Fernando was unable to drive at the next race in Bahrain and was replaced by a future teammate and current Formula E driver for Mercedes, Stoffel Vandoorne. Vandoorne is one of 2 of the last 10 drivers who have managed to score an F1 point as a reserve driver by finishing P10. In addition to Monaco 2017 and Bahrain 2016, Alonso missed another race, which was also due to a serious crash he suffered while testing before the 2015 season. Kevin Magnussen replaced him at the time after he was out of a full-time F1 seat for a year after failing to deliver in the McLaren in 2014. But in fact, he didn't even replace him as he couldn't start the race. Mechanical failure. The 2015 McLaren really was a GP2 engine. Also, one of Alonso's teammates in Formula 1 was facing the same scenario as Fernando did 3 times. It is the driver which's last win was at the race where he lost the championship he thought to have won. The driver who said, "I retire," but in the end still raced for another season. The driver who's racing in Formula E now, or actually has raced in Formula E, and is a Brazilian legend, Felipe Massa. Massa missed a total of 9 races in F1 due to an illness and a heavy crash. I think that every F1 fan will at least remember that crash. We are at the 2009 Hungarian Grand Prix. The second part of qualifying is underway. Fernando Alonso is on his way to claim a pole position in a slow Renault. The new Brawn team was flying in that season, but suffered a shock in their quali session as Barrichello was out after Q2. But not only the driver was out of the session, but a 600-gram heavy metal spring. It got loose from the Brawn, and although the Ferrari of Felipe Massa was further away, the spring tickled onto the ground and hit Massa's head while the Ferrari was 240 kph fast. The crash brought Massa's season to an end and Luca Badoer to a comeback for the 2009 European Grand Prix. The Italian raced in Formula 1 in 1993, 1995, 1996 and Formula 90 in 1999. 10 years later he did a comeback in F1 for a top team, but for only 2 races, although Massa was out for 8 races in 2009 and was replaced in 7 of them. The reason why Badoer was only racing twice in 2009? Simple. He was just far too slow for Ferrari. Although he was out of the sport for nearly 10 years, P17 and P14 are way too slow for a Ferrari replacement. Also at the 2009 Belgian Grand Prix, Badoer's second commitment, Giancarlo Fisichella, drove a brilliant race for Force India and finished second behind a Ferrari, the one of Kimi. From that point on, the rumour kitchen was boiling over with Fisichella to Ferrari rumours. On September 3rd, 2009 it became official then. Giancarlo Fisichella replaces Luca Badoer, who replaced the injured Felipe Massa. So many replacements at one team in 8 races because of one injury. How many points Badoer and Fisichella scored in that 7 races in which they replaced Massa? 0. And both Badoer and Fisichella never raced in Formula 1 again after 2009. Massa came back in 2010 and began the season with a podium at Bahrain. That was a bit unfortunate for the Italian replacement drivers for Massa. Oh, and we mentioned that Massa missed a total of 9 races in F1, but only got replaced in 8 of them. The mathematicians on the U may ask themselves now, races where Massa got replaced? 8. Badoer did 2 of them, 6 left. Fisichella races in 5 of them, 1 left. Wait, where did that one go? It was the 2017 Hungarian Grand Prix. Felipe raced in FP1, FP2 and FP3, but was unable to continue the weekend after sitting in a hospital with a viral illness. We know the type of replacement reasons from this year as well. And so Paul di Resta came to his last race in Formula 1 and sat in the Williams car for the Hungarian Grand Prix. After qualifying 19th, di Resta never saw the checkered flag at the end because he had to retire. What we've learned from that Massa bit, every driver who replaced Felipe Massa for some races in F1, for whatever reason, ended their Formula 1 career after it. And so Massa did after 2017. Book closed. We have talked about viral illnesses and crashes. These were the 2 reasons for Sergio Perez to miss 3 races in Formula 1. The first, the 2011 Monaco Grand Prix. Unfortunately, this year Formula 1 is not racing around the streets of Monte Carlo. In 2011, however, they were. And so the young 21-year-old Checo drove for the first time in a Formula 1 car in a Monaco Grand Prix. Unfortunately, Checo never got around to starting the GP itself. He outperformed his teammate Kamui Kobayashi, who failed to make it into Q3. Despite being in a good position then in Q3, young Checo couldn't do a lap as he lost the back of the car and had a huge sideways shunt into the harbour chicane barrier. The incident reminded many fans of the one Karl Wendlinger had with his Sauber in 1994. Wendlinger was in a coma for several weeks after the crash. Luckily, Sergio escaped less injured. Checo suffered a concussion and a compression of the thigh. Paris not only missed the race in Monaco the day after, but also the next Grand Prix in Montreal. In this case, the Mexican was replaced by a former McLaren driver, whose main language is also Spanish, and who is a driver who got kicked out of F1 by Sauber in the middle of the year, a year earlier. Of course, I am talking about Pedro de la Rosa. The experienced Spaniard was Sauber's reserve driver in 2011 and got his chance for the team again after being replaced by Nick Heidfeld after 14 races in 2010. Although De La Rosa wasn't Sauber's only reserve driver that season, he was selected as Perez's replacement for the Canadian Grand Prix. I think his experience was the main argument there. Oh, and Canada 2011. There was something about that race. It was the longest race in Formula 1 of all time, with Jenson Button reaching the checkered flag after 4 hours, 4 minutes and 39 seconds. The race included everything: crashes, drama, extreme weather condition, interchangeable weather, red flags, everything. It was a bit like the German Grand Prix, just a little longer and with red flags. But how did Perez's successor De La Rosa do his job? While Jenson Button won with an impressive 6-stop strategy, Pedro managed to finish the race with 2 pit stops and not being lapped. Quite good for a one-race comeback. In the end, he finished 12th after starting 17th. But whatever you have to say, Sergio Perez was in the car for FP1 but felt uncomfortable and not good enough to drive. For Pedro de la Rosa, it was a rather surprising and unexpected return to the cockpit. In that sense, he was a pretty good replacement in an even better race. 2 drivers who were teammates in 2019 drove as test and reserve drivers in the first free practice of the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix. One of them had a year off after driving in F1 in 2010 and even taking pole position in the race, while the other one got a full cockpit in F1 at Silverstone for the remainder of 2011. Of course, one of them is Daniel Ricciardo. The other one, Nico Hülkenberg. That brings us to races 2 and 3 that Checo has missed in his F1 career. Racing Point's Sergio Perez first had an unclear test for the coronavirus and then a positive one. This test result meant the Mexican was unable to compete in the following 2 races at Silverstone and had to go into a 7-day quarantine. Although the driver's condition and recovery were the most important things in this situation, Racing Point had to quickly decide who would stand in for Checo. That led to one of the craziest and most unexpected comebacks in Formula 1 history. Gutierrez Van Dorn. Racing Point's reserve drivers were either unavailable or have not driven an F1 weekend since 2016. But there was this German who left the sport after 2019 and said that goodbye is never permanent. Nico Hülkenberg, of course. Otmar Safnauer thought of him. He called him. He asked him. He got it. Hulk is back. Oh, and corona test, please.
Negative, Lewis. Negative.
Then get dressed in your temporary teammate's suit, put on a black helmet, number 27, and let's go for the first free practice session of the British Grand Prix. Your ass cheek gets numb? Do not worry. P13 in quali, the engine for the race starts. Yeah, no comeback in the race for the Hulk in the first race where he could have made it. Is Checo negative again though? Nico, come over here. Second chance please. His engine was in the recall, and so he qualified an impressive 3rd place behind the Mercedes and got props from Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, and without a final pit stop at the 17th anniversary Grand Prix, he would have not achieved the podium, but an impressive result. And he scored more points at one start than Haas, Alfa Romeo and Williams combined. GG boy. The next driver kind of falls into the category, oh, he raced in F1? I speak of Manor and Sauber driver and former DTM champion Pascal Verlaine. The German races in Formula E at the moment and had great moments at Mahindra, with having signed for Porsche for the next season of the electrical series. He raced in Formula 1 for 2 years. For Manor in 2016 next to Rio Haryanto and current Renault driver Esteban Ocon, and Sauber next to Marcus Ericsson. Actually, when you want to know what happened to Pascal Verlaine, F1 Addict made a good video about it, so check him out definitely and watch that video. But first, watch this one to an end and listen to which races Pascal Verlaine has missed. Together with Sebastian Vettel, Felipe Massa and other Formula 1 drivers, Wehrlein participated in the Race of Champions event at Miami at the beginning of 2017. In the battle between Germany and Brazil, the DTM champion competed against multiple Formula 1 winner Felipe Massa. Just at the start of the race, Wehrlein suffered a heavy crash and rolled over the safety barriers multiple times after clipping the back of the Brazilian. Despite saying that he is happy that both are okay, he already missed out to the rest of ROC, as doctors have told him better not to participate anymore. It was the same as for the first Formula 1 test week for Sauber, as he missed it due to a cervical spine compression he suffered at that crash in January. He was replaced by a driver who also is familiar to us, Antonio Giovinazzi. And although Wehrlein returned into the car for week 2, he was a lot slower than his teammate and the slowest full-time driver of the pre-season tests in 2017, which showed that he still wasn't at 100% after that crash. Only Giovinazzi and for his India's reserve driver Alfonso Celis were slower than the German. At the first free practice at the season opener in Australia, it was clear. Wehrlein cannot compete in the race as a long-term sequence of the crash in January, pointing out that the crash wasn't just one to walk away from okay. Giovinazzi thanked him surely as he came to his F1 debut through that miss-out, but as he crashed often and couldn't show what he's capable of, he will have thought about that thanks again probably. Wehrlein came back for the third race of the season at Bahrain and finished the season in a good way, as Sauber was the slowest car on the grid in that particular season. You never know what's going to happen in Formula 1. We have already talked about Formula 1 legends in this video. Massa, Alonso, both were driving for Ferrari in their career, also so did the Iceman. He raced for the Prancing Horses from 2007 to 2009 and for a second stint from 2014 to 2018. Before his second stint at Ferrari, Kimi drove for Lotus, who became Renault in 2016. With them, Raikkonen returned to Formula 1 in 2012 after having raced in rally for some time. Although he was quite successful with Lotus in those 2 years, with scoring a win at the 2012 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, taking several pole positions and making it clear that they should leave him alone with instructions, tensions between him and the team grew at the end of 2013. The team didn't pay the Finn his full salary at the end of 2013. In general, the team had a tough time in 2013. As well as arguing with their number one driver, Kimi only thought mwah and underwent a back operation so that he could start his time at Ferrari from 2014 on without having back pain. Perhaps it wasn't necessary to undergo the operation so early that he missed the last 2 races of 2013, but if I were driving for a team that didn't pay me, I'd take every opportunity to get out. And so the Iceman did. It was also officially announced that Kimi threatened the Lotus team by not competing in the US and Brazil. In the end, the operation took over this task. But when I got back to the main subject of this video, I said that Kimi missed 2 races in 2013 because he couldn't drive. In particular, it was the American and the Brazilian Grand Prix. Who replaced him? Another Finn, Heikki Kovalainen. After driving for Caterham in 2012, the former McLaren driver became Lotus's test and reserve driver and drove in several FP1s. With it being clear that Kimi would miss the final 2 races of 2013, Kovalainen was the most likely driver to replace him. At the age of 32, Heikki jumped into an F1 car for the last 2 times of his career. Unfortunately, he couldn't get a single point as he finished 14th in both races. Consistency is key, but sometimes the key doesn't unlock the door, huh? After that, he never raced in Formula 1 again, while Kimi certainly watched something other than the races on TV while eating an ice cream and returning to F1 for Ferrari in 2014, without back pain and without financial issues. So that was it. A lot of information, but we thought that we unpack it in a quite humorous way and to make it as entertaining as possible. Of course, there were other scenarios in the 2020 season, like Lance Stroll being replaced or George Russell even being replaced at a team but not on the grid, or a certain Romain Grosjean after a horrific crash. But for now we think that 5 drivers are enough information for your brain. But what are your thoughts on those stories and which drivers we should grab up again in part 2 of this series? Let it all down in the comments. And yeah, that's it basically. Leave a like if you want to, leave a comment if you want to, leave a subscription if you want to, and we think that we want to see you here in the future or something like that. Until then, have a great time. Bye bye.